Kill it. Shut down the entire system. Anya Sharma's voice was a blade of ice, cutting through the sterile silence of her penthouse office. Below her, the city sprawled, a glittering circuit board of light and possibility. But 50 floors up, in the glass-walled sanctum of Aerodyne Global CEO, a single algorithm was threatening to burn it all to the ground. Ma'am, if we do that, the market will panic. We'd lose billions in valuation before the opening bell. A voice crackled from the speakerphone on her sprawling obsidian desk. It was Rylance, her head of data science, a man whose genius was matched only by his complete lack of a spine. We are already losing millions. David? Anya countered, her gaze fixed on the holographic display shimmering in the air before her. It showed a torrent of data, a river of green and red, and somewhere within it, an invisible leak, a ghost bleed, millions of dollars, vanishing into the digital ether every hour, untraceable, unstoppable. It's a hemorrhage. You don't stop a hemorrhage by hoping it clots on its own. You apply pressure. Now, a heavy sigh on the other end. I can't, Ms. Sharma. The system's protocols are locked. The architect designed it to be self-sustaining, to prevent this very kind of manual override. It's a fortress. Then find me the architect, she snapped, ending the call with a vicious tap. The silence that descended was heavier than before. Fortress. The irony was suffocating. Her entire life was a fortress of her own design. This glass box in the sky, her meticulously curated board, her heart encased in layers of professional scar tissue. And now her own creation had turned on her. Across the vast office, a small figure sat at a child-sized table, oblivious. Maya, her 7-year-old daughter, a silent, perfect porcelain doll. She hadn't spoken a word in 367 days. Not since the accident. Not since Anya's world had fractured the first time. Now Maya simply drew, her crayons the only voice she had left. Tonight, it was a familiar pattern. A swirl of tangled black and gray lines, a maelstrom of chaos on the page. Anya's gaze softened for a fraction of a second. The company could burn. The market could crash. But that small, silent girl was the only thing in the universe that truly mattered. The bleed was a threat to Aerodyne, but it was also a threat to the stable world Maya needed, the world Anya had killed herself to build. A soft, rhythmic squeak pulled her from her thoughts. It was the janitor. He moved through the executive floor after hours, a ghost in a gray uniform, so unobtrusive he was practically invisible. Anya had never bothered to learn his name. He was just a function, part of the building's machinery. He was polishing the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to her, his movements slow and methodical. She turned away, dismissing him. But then a sound, low and resonant, a hum. It was a simple melody, a folk tune that felt out of place in this temple of modern commerce. It was gentle, melancholic, and achingly familiar, though she couldn't place it. Elias Thorne felt the weight of the silence in the CEO's office. He wasn't supposed to be on this floor tonight, but the regular cleaner had called in sick. He knew he should be invisible, a mindless drone polishing glass, but the tension in the room was a physical thing. He'd overheard the frantic phone call, the words hemorrhage and fortress. It was the language of his old life, a language he had tried to unlearn. He focused on his work, on the circular motion of the cloth in his hand. He focused on the quiet. But then he saw the little girl. He saw the drawing, the knot of black crayon that looked so much like the tangle in his own heart. He knew that kind of quiet. He knew that kind of pain. Without thinking, the melody surfaced. It was Sarah's song. The one she'd sing to their son, Leo, when he was small. A song about a star that got lost and forgot how to shine. He hummed it under his breath, a private prayer, a memory. He saw the girl's head lift. Her crayon stilled. Her wide, dark eyes, so much like her mother's, fixed on him. He felt a jolt, a flash of regret for breaking his first rule. Never be seen. But he couldn't stop. He turned his head slightly, met her gaze, and offered a small, tired smile. The hum deepened, and words came, soft as dust motes in the artificial light. Little star, lost in the gray, did you forget the light of day? Maya's eyes widened. Her small hands, which were usually clenched or scribbling, relaxed on the table. Anya watched, frozen. She saw the interaction, a silent conversation passing between the janitor and her daughter. She saw Maya's focus shift from the paper to the man. It was the most engaged she had seen her child in a year. A knot of something fierce and protective tightened in her chest. She was about to order him to stop, to get away from her daughter, when the man sang the next line. Just remember, you're not alone. A gentle voice will call you home. And then the impossible happened. Maya's lips parted. A small, rusty sound, like a hinge that hadn't been used in a lifetime, escaped. She looked at Elias, her expression one of profound, searching curiosity. And she whispered a single word, a word that shattered the sterile silence of the room and the frozen landscape of Anya Sharma's heart. Shine. Anya's breath caught in her throat. The stylus she'd been holding slipped from her numb fingers and clattered onto the desk. The sound was like a gunshot in the sudden, absolute stillness. Maya had spoken. After a year of silence, a year of specialists and therapists and whispered pleas, a janitor had made her daughter speak. She rose slowly from her chair, her mind, which processed terabytes of data before breakfast, struggling to compute what she had just witnessed. The data did not align. The variables were all wrong. This was an anomaly, an impossibility. She stared at the man, who now looked as stunned as she felt. He had turned fully, his expression one of deep apology, as if he'd just shattered a priceless vase. But he hadn't broken anything. He had fixed the most broken thing in her world. Anya Sharma, the ice queen of Aerodyne Tower, the woman who trusted only numbers and saw people as assets or liabilities, looked at the janitor. For the first time, she truly saw him, and with a voice stripped of its usual authority, filled instead with a raw, desperate awe, she asked the only question that mattered. Who are you? Elias felt the question like a physical blow. Who are you? It was the one question he had spent the last 5 years making sure no one would ever ask. He was a ghost. He was a widower. He was Leo's dad. He was the man who pushed a broom through the empty corridors of other people's power. That was the entire list. To be anything more was to invite the past back in, and the past was a monster that had already eaten his life once. I'm nobody, he said, his voice low. Just the janitor. I'm sorry if I disturbed you. He began to gather his things, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Get out. Disappear. Run. He had broken his rule. He had been seen. The connection with the little girl, Maya, had been an instinct, a foolish echo of the father he was, not the phantom he was supposed to be. Stay, Anya commanded. The ice was back in her voice, but underneath it was a fissure of something else. Not anger, curiosity. My office. Now. He followed her, his worn work boots silent on the plush carpet. The office felt like an interrogation chamber, a cube of glass and steel suspended 50 stories above the real world. She didn't offer him a seat. She stood behind her desk, a general surveying a battlefield, and he was the unexpected variable she needed to solve. That song, she began, her tone analytical. The melody is a variation on a Balkan lullaby from the 18th century. The lyrics are not traditional. Where did you get them? Elias was taken aback. He'd expected a reprimand, not a musicological analysis. My late wife wrote them. For our son. Your wife? Anya's eyes narrowed, processing. You saw my daughter. You analyzed her state. You chose a specific method of engagement and you elicited a response that a team of child psychologists has failed to achieve for 12 months. You didn't just sing a song. You broke a pattern. He remained silent. She was right, of course. He hadn't just been humming. He had seen the locked-in-place tension in Maya's shoulders, the repetitive, frantic nature of her drawing. He had recognized it as a feedback loop of trauma. The song, its melody and gentle lyrics, was a pattern interrupt. It was an offering of a different, safer pattern. It was a technique he'd learned from one of Sarah's psychology textbooks, something he'd read to feel close to her after she was gone. Anya leaned forward, her intensity pinning him in place. I have another pattern that needs breaking. A ghost in my company's code is stealing millions of dollars, and the system is designed so that no one can stop it. A fortress, my best people call it. She paused, her gaze sweeping over his janitor's uniform, his calloused hands, and the deep, weary intelligence in his eyes. I had my head of security run your employment file the moment you walked in here. Your real name is Elias Thorne. Your background check is a ghost. It's been wiped clean with a level of sophistication our government clients would pay a fortune for. A man that's skilled at disappearing doesn't take a job cleaning floors unless he's hiding from something significant. The blood drained from his face. Thorne. She knew his name. The fortress he'd built around himself for 5 years had just been breached. She slid a sleek, impossibly thin tablet across the desk. On it was a single encrypted file. This is a data packet containing a fragment of the corrupted code and the transaction logs from the last hour. My team sees nothing but flawless execution. They say the numbers are perfect. She locked her eyes on his. I am offering you a test. Find one thing. One flaw, one anomaly that my entire department of certified geniuses has missed. You have until morning. Elias stared at the tablet as if it were a snake. This was the world he had fled. The world of numbers and secrets. The world where finding the truth could get your family killed. I'm a janitor. I'll pay you $250,000, she said, her voice flat. If you find something, anything, you get the money. No questions asked. You can take your son and build a new life where no one will ever find you. If you find nothing, you walk away, and this conversation never happened. $250,000. It was a breathtaking sum. It was safety. It was a new start for Leo, far away from the ghosts that haunted his father. It was an escape hatch he'd never dreamed of having. But to earn it, he had to become Elias Thorne again. Just for one night. His gaze drifted past her to the small table where Maya sat. She had picked up her crayons again. She was drawing a single bright yellow star in the corner of her chaotic page. A small point of light in the darkness. He thought of Leo, of his bright, trusting smile. He thought of the constant, low-grade fear that was his companion. The fear that their quiet life was fragile, temporary. He reached out and picked up the tablet. 12 hours. Anya gave a curt nod, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. Triumph? Relief? The file is yours. Don't disappoint me, Mr. Thorne. Elias walked out of the gleaming tower and took the subway back to his small, 2-bedroom apartment in a world away from penthouses and ghost bleeds. He unlocked the door to the smell of microwaved pizza and the sound of a cartoon superhero saving a city. Dad! Leo, all of 8 years old with his mother's bright eyes and his own gap-toothed grin, launched himself into Elias's arms. You're late. Did you vanquish the evil dust bunnies of floor 42? Elias hugged him tight, burying his face in his son's hair, the terror and temptation of the evening melting away in the simple, profound reality of this embrace. Something like that, buddy. After Leo was asleep, his breathing soft, and even in the next room, Elias sat at their small kitchen table. He opened the tablet. The encrypted file bloomed on the screen, a wall of code and numbers. For a moment he felt a wave of nausea. It looked like the files from the Rivas case, the one that had cost him everything. A flash of memory, sharp and unwanted. Sarah, laughing, telling him over dinner. You see things in the static, Eli. You see the music in the noise. He pushed the memory down, took a deep breath, and let his eyes scan the first lines of code. The old instincts, dormant for 5 years, began to stir. The world of brooms and shadows fell away, and the world of numbers, of pure, unassailable logic, returned. The noise began to resolve itself into a rhythm. And as the hours ticked by, and the city outside slept, Elias Thorne began to hear the music. Anya Sharma did not sleep. Sleep was an inefficiency she couldn't afford. She sat in her silent office, the city lights now muted by the pre-dawn gloom, and watched the market feeds from Tokyo and Hong Kong. She tracked the ghost bleed. A steady, relentless drain. Another 3 million vanished overnight. She had staked $250,000 and the fate of her company on the intuition of a janitor. It was the most illogical, data-deficient decision of her entire career. And it was the only move she had left. Her board was already circling. She'd had 3 calls from Marcus Vance alone. His voice oozing a predatory concern that set her teeth on edge. He wanted to help, to form an oversight committee. He wanted control. She replayed the scene with her daughter, with the janitor, Thorne. She'd watched the security footage a dozen times. The way he'd approached, the gentleness in his voice, the immediate, magnetic effect on Maya. He hadn't just sung a song. He'd created a safe space with nothing but his presence. It was a skill set she couldn't quantify, and it terrified and fascinated her in equal measure. Just as the first rays of sun sliced through the skyscrapers, the private elevator chimed. Elias Thorne stood there. He looked exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed, but he was thrumming with a focused energy that was entirely at odds with the rumpled uniform he still wore. He held the tablet in his hand. "Well?" Anya's voice was clipped, betraying none of the anxiety churning in her gut. He didn't speak. He walked to her desk, connected the tablet to the holographic display, and with a few deft swipes, filled the air with his night's work. It wasn't a single anomaly. It was a symphony of them. "You've been looking for a leak," Elias began, his voice raspy but clear. "A glitch in the algorithm. You won't find one, because the bleed isn't a glitch. It's a feature." He brought up 2 columns of code. One was the live algorithm. The other was the original design specification. To a normal eye, they were identical. Your team was looking for errors in the math. But the math is perfect. Too perfect, he highlighted a single line of code, a subroutine that handled transaction processing. Every financial transaction, every trade, every currency exchange, creates rounding remainders, fractions of a cent dust. The system is designed to round them down and sweep them into a general holding account. Standard practice. He then magnified the line in the live code. It was different by only 3 characters. This version doesn't round down. It slices. It takes that fractional remainder, that sliver of a cent, and instead of sweeping it, it diverts it. He gestured to a complex flowchart that bloomed in the air. It's a classic salami slicing scheme, but on a scale I've never seen. We're talking quadrillionths of a dollar, skimmed from millions of transactions every second. This financial dust, invisible to any standard audit. But it adds up. He pointed to a number at the bottom of the screen. It was the exact amount that had been bleeding from the company. The system isn't broken. It's the most ruthlessly efficient theft device ever built. The architect didn't build a fortress to protect your money. He built it to protect his. Anya stared at the display, her mind racing. The audacity, the sheer brilliance of it. He had done it. This man, in one night, with a single data packet, had seen what her entire division had missed. Her respect for his competence was absolute and instantaneous. It was a purer feeling than any she had felt in years. She turned to him, the name of the original architect, a man long since retired, on her lips. But Elias shook his head. The original code was clean. I checked the archived developer logs. This change was introduced in a system update 6 months ago. The commit was masked, signed with a forged security key. But whoever did it needed the highest level of system access. They needed to be on the inside. Deep on the inside. The implications settled over the room, cold and heavy. The thief was still here. "Name your price," Anya said, her voice low. "The $250,000 is already yours. What will it take to keep you here until you find him?" Elias looked away, his gaze falling on Maya's drawing of the star, which was still on the small table. "I did the job. That was the deal. I just want the money and my life back." He couldn't get sucked back in. He wouldn't. Leo was waiting. "You don't have a life to go back to. Not a safe one," Anya countered, her voice hard as diamond. "The person who did this is not just a thief. They're a ghost who can manipulate our entire digital infrastructure. They know someone is onto them now. The moment you started probing that code, silent alarms would have tripped. They will look for you. Running will just make you an easier target. She saw the flicker of fear in his eyes, the fear he was trying so hard to hide. She pressed her advantage. They have made this company vulnerable. That makes my daughter vulnerable. You have a son. You, of all people, should understand what I'm willing to do to neutralize a threat to my child. It was a cold, calculated move, using his love for his son against him. But it was also the truth. They were both parents, backed into a corner. "Help me, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice losing its edge, becoming something closer to a plea. "Help me find him. I'll give you anything you want. A new identity, a trust fund for your son that will set him up for life. Protection. But I need the architect." Elias felt the walls of his quiet life crumbling. She was right. He had kicked the hornet's nest. The monster he'd been hiding from now had a new face. He could take the money and run, but he would be looking over his shoulder for the rest of his life and Leo's. The only way out was through. "I'll do it," he said, the words tasting like ash. "But on my terms. No one knows I'm working for you. To everyone in this building, I'm still the janitor. I work from the shadows. I need complete, untraceable system access. And a key to the sub-basement server rooms." Anya nodded. A deal sealed in the tense, early morning air. Done. "Welcome to the night shift, Mr. Thorne." He was no longer a ghost. He was a hunter, and he was hunting in the dark. The sub-basement of Aerodyne Tower was a different world. Up above, glass and light created an illusion of transparency. Down here, concrete and steel enforced a reality of secrets. It was a labyrinth of humming servers and thick, bundled cables. The building's digital circulatory system. In a decommissioned server room, tucked behind a faulty steam pipe, Elias Thorne built his new office. It was a stark contrast to Anya's penthouse suite. A single folding table, a repurposed chair, and a bank of monitors he'd requisitioned, all funneling a fire hose of Aerodyne data directly to him. By day, he lived his cover. He pushed his cart through the pristine hallways, emptying wastebaskets, nodding silently to executives who looked right through him. He was wallpaper, a function utterly invisible. He listened to the whispers, the corporate gossip, the rising tide of anxiety about the company's minor market fluctuations. He learned more about the company's true emotional state from the trash he collected than any progress report could reveal. By night, he descended into the concrete heart of the tower and became a digital wraith. He lived in the code, tracing the ghost's movements, searching for a pattern, a signature, a single mistake. Armed with full system access, he began to cross-reference the date of the malicious code update with every high-level access log, every security clearance file, every piece of internal communication from that week. It was like searching for a single grain of sand on a vast beach. Anya, meanwhile, was fighting a war on her own front. She had to project an aura of absolute control while her company was being systematically dismantled from within. The pressure from the board was immense, and its sharpest point was Marcus Vance. He sat across from her in the sterile boardroom, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his suit impeccably tailored. He was the embodiment of old money stability, a man who had been on the board since her father's time. "Anya, we need to be proactive," Vance said, his voice a smooth baritone that dripped with condescending concern. He had called an emergency meeting. "These market jitters. It's a sign of instability. The shareholders are getting nervous. I propose we form a special subcommittee to oversee operations until this blows over. I would, of course, be willing to chair it." He was making a power play, using the crisis she couldn't reveal to usurp her authority. She looked at him, at the faint, confident smile playing on his lips, and felt a chill. "Thank you for your concern, Marcus," she said, her voice polished steel. "But I have the situation under control. We're implementing a new series of predictive models. The instability is temporary." She was lying to her own board, a high-wire act with no safety net. Her only net was a man in a janitor's uniform, working 300 feet below them. The thought was both terrifying and strangely exhilarating. She was operating on trust, on the competence of a single individual. It was a foreign, uncomfortable feeling. Down in his concrete bunker, Elias found it. A digital breadcrumb. The forged security key used to sign the malicious code update had been authenticated by a physical security dongle, a two-factor authentication device. The system logs showed which dongles were active on the network at the exact moment of the update. There were only five people in the entire 1,000-employee organization who could have possibly approved that code. He sent the list to Anya's secure terminal. It was short, and each name on it was a blow. 1. David Rylance, Head of Data Science. 2. Helen Cho, Chief Technology Officer. 3. 2 senior-level systems architects with near-total system knowledge. 4. Marcus Vance, Board Liaison for Project Chimera, the official name of the proprietary algorithm. Elias stared at the fifth name. A board member, a non-technical executive. It seemed the least likely, and yet, a liaison would have the perfect cover for accessing technical areas, asking questions, and obtaining security permissions without raising suspicion. He brought the list to Anya's office late that night, after the tower had emptied. She looked at the names on her screen, her face pale in the glow. Marcus, she whispered. He was my father's friend. He's been a mentor to me since I took over. The best place to hide is in plain sight, Elias said quietly. The most damaging betrayals always come from the people you're taught to trust. He spoke from a place of deep, personal knowledge, the words leaving a bitter taste in his mouth. Anya's mind, always analytical, was fighting against the emotional implication. She needed data. She needed proof. This is a list of possibilities, not a confession. A dongle can be stolen. A password can be phished. We need to know who was actually at the terminal. We can't prove it retroactively, Elias said. The logs from that terminal were wiped, professionally. But we can set a new trap. His plan was simple and elegant. He proposed they create a honeypot. He would code a ghost account within Aerodyne's financial system, a dormant holding company that looked like a forgotten relic of a past merger. Then he would subtly alter the thief's slicing algorithm, redirecting an infinitesimal fraction of the stolen funds, less than 1%, into this new account. It would be an amount so small even the thief might not notice it. The account will be sealed with a unique encryption key, Elias explained, his eyes alive with the thrill of the intellectual chase. The only way to access it, to drain it, is by using the same high-level backdoor the thief used to install the code. The moment he touches it, a silent alarm will trip, and it will log the origin point of the breach. We'll have him. Anya looked from the plan on the screen to the man standing before her. In the dim light of her office, he was no longer just a janitor. The weariness was still there, etched into the lines around his eyes, but it was overshadowed by a sharp, focused brilliance. He was a weapon, and she was aiming him at the heart of her company. Do it, she said. The trap was set. Now all they could do was wait for the ghost to take the bait. As Elias left, Anya walked over to Maya's little table. Her daughter was asleep in her small bedroom just off the main office, but her latest drawing was there. It was the same tangle of black and gray lines, but this time, next to the single yellow star, she had drawn a small gray figure holding a broom. Anya traced the outline of the figure with her finger, a strange and unfamiliar warmth spreading through her chest. It felt dangerously like hope. The silence of waiting was a unique form of torture. For 48 hours, every market transaction, every flicker of data across the Aerodyne network, felt like a held breath. Anya moved through her meetings, her conference calls, a perfect automaton of corporate leadership. She smiled. She negotiated. She projected strength. All while a part of her mind was tethered to a silent alarm in a digital ghost account, waiting for it to trip. She found herself seeking out Elias's presence, not in her office, but in the hallways. A glimpse of his gray uniform, the rhythmic squeak of his cart, became a strange source of comfort. He was her secret, her ace in the hole, hiding in the open. They would exchange a brief, imperceptible nod, a conversation held in a single glance that conveyed everything. Any news? Not yet. Stay the course. The alert came at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. Anya was in her office, Elias in his basement command center. Her secure tablet chimed, a soft, single note that cut through the silence like a scream. On the screen, a simple message from Elias, "We have a bite." Anya's heart hammered against her ribs. She brought up the monitoring feed Elias had built for her. There it was. The honeypot account, which had been accumulating funds for 2 days, was being accessed. A complex series of rerouting protocols and IP masks flared to life on the screen as the thief attempted to cover his tracks, bouncing the signal from servers in Singapore to Estonia to Brazil. It was a masterful display of evasion. But Elias had anticipated it. His trap wasn't just the honeypot. It was the digital path to it. He had laced the route with his own tracer programs, a series of virtual tripwires. As the thief's program navigated the maze, it left behind fragments of its own source code. "He's good," Elias's voice said, patched through her encrypted comms. "He's using a masking algorithm I've never seen before. But he's arrogant." "Get me a location, Elias," Anya said, her voice tight. "Working on it. The final bounce is happening now. He's funneling the signal through the building's own internal network to make it look like a system process." There was a pause, a few seconds of frantic typing sounds, and then Elias's voice, sharp and final. "Got it." The initial access request, the very first ping before the masks went up. It came from a hardline terminal. Registered to the executive office on the 49th floor. The office of Marcus Vance. Anya sank into her chair, the confirmation landing like a punch to the gut. Marcus. It was him. The data was irrefutable. The betrayal was absolute. "We have him," she breathed. "We have him." They were supposed to have time. Their plan was to gather this final piece of evidence and present it to a trusted security consultant, to build an airtight case before confronting him. But they had underestimated their opponent's paranoia. They had underestimated his ruthlessness. Elias was leaving the tower just before dawn, his official janitorial shift over. He was walking to the 24-hour garage where he kept his beat-up sedan, his mind already on Leo, on getting him breakfast and walking him to school. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He expected a message from Anya. It wasn't. It was an unknown number, a single image file. He opened it. The world tilted on its axis. It was a photograph of Leo. His son was on the school playground, a place he should be in 3 hours, meaning the photo was from yesterday. He was on the swings, his head thrown back in a joyful laugh. The photo was taken from a distance, through a long lens, the chain-link fence of the schoolyard slightly out of focus in the foreground. It was a predator's eye view. Beneath the image, a single line of text. "Bright boy. It would be a shame if his father got distracted." The air rushed from Elias's lungs. Cold, pure terror, the like of which he hadn't felt in 5 years, seized him. It was the Rivas cartel all over again. The same tactic, the same violation. They couldn't get to him, so they showed him they could get to his family. They showed him they could get to his heart and rip it out. He sprinted from the garage, not to his car, but hailing a cab, his hands shaking so badly he could barely type in the address of Leo's school. He had to see him. He had to know he was safe. He didn't wait until he arrived. He burst into Anya's office, bypassing security, his face a mask of white-hot fury and black despair. He slammed his phone down on her desk. "This is what happens," he snarled, his voice a raw, ragged thing. "This is the price of digging for the truth. This is what I ran from." Anya looked at the picture, and the ice in her veins seemed to crack. The image of the smiling, unaware child on the playground. It could have been Maya. The threat was vile, personal, and utterly unforgivable. "The deal is off," Elias said, his voice breaking. "I'm taking my son and we're disappearing tonight. You have your proof. You handle it." A memory, sharp and brutal, flashed behind his eyes. The call from the police. The words accident and skid marks, the sight of Sarah's car, crumpled like a piece of paper. The official report said it was black ice on an overpass. But he knew. He'd just delivered the final evidence to the feds that morning. There was no black ice. There was only a price. He had paid it with his wife's life. He would not pay it again with his son's. Anya saw the raw agony in his face. She saw the ghost of a past trauma so profound it had driven him into hiding. And in that moment she saw herself. She saw the fierce, primal terror she felt every time she looked at Maya and remembered the accident that had stolen her voice. A hit and run. The driver never found. A case closed too quickly. An event that had happened just weeks after she'd finalized a hostile takeover of a major rival. She had always told herself it was a coincidence. Now she wasn't so sure. The professional mask she wore, the armor of the CEO, it all dissolved. This wasn't about money or corporate espionage anymore. It was about their children. "Elias," she said, her voice quiet but imbued with a new, unshakable strength. She stood up and walked around the desk, closing the distance between them. "Look at me." He threatened your son. He crossed a line from which there is no retreat. Do you really think running will make you safe now? A man who can do this will not stop hunting you. He knows who you are. She met his terrified gaze, her own eyes blazing with a cold fire. The only way to protect Leo, the only way I can protect Maya, is to finish this. To cut the head off the snake. You can't do it alone. And I can't do it without you. She made a decision, a strategic and deeply personal pivot. You and Leo will move into the penthouse. Effective immediately. My security detail is the best in the world. This is a fortress and you will be inside it with me. He made this personal. So we will end it. Together. It was no longer a transactional alliance. It was a pact, sealed by the shared, sacred duty of parenthood. The hunt had changed. The prize was no longer justice. It was survival. Moving into Anya Sharma's penthouse was like stepping onto another planet. For Elias and Leo, whose world was a cozy, cluttered apartment where every object held a memory, the vast, minimalist space felt like a museum. Glass walls revealed a dizzying panorama of the city, creating a sensation of floating, of being untethered from the earth. The furniture was sculptural, the colors were muted grays and whites, and the silence was absolute. "Whoa," Leo breathed, spinning in a slow circle in the center of the cavernous living room. "Do we live in a spaceship now?" Elias forced a smile, the knot of fear in his stomach tightening. "For a little while, buddy. It's a work thing." The meeting between the children was a study in contrasts. Leo, ever the extrovert, walked right up to Maya, who was sitting at her usual table, drawing. "Hi, I'm Leo. My dad works with your mom. Do you like superheroes?" Maya looked up, her large, dark eyes assessing him. She didn't speak, merely gave a small, hesitant nod. Cool. Leo pulled out his own sketchbook and a worn pencil case. He sat down opposite her. "I can draw all of them. See? This is Captain Comet." He began to sketch with a practiced confidence. Anya and Elias watched from a distance. An unspoken understanding passed between them. This was the sanctum. This was what they were fighting to protect. The sight of their two children, each scarred in their own way, finding a quiet space of connection, solidified their alliance into something harder than steel. The penthouse office became their war room. Day and night, they worked side by side, the remnants of their old roles, CEO and janitor, stripped away. They were simply Anya and Elias, two minds focused on a single objective. The professional barriers crumbled under the pressure and proximity. Over late-night takeout containers and endless cups of coffee, they began to share more than just data. He told her about Sarah, about her wit and her warmth, about how she had been the one to encourage his obsessive need to find patterns, calling it his superpower. He told her, in halting, painful sentences, about the Rivas case and the accident that followed. He laid bare the trauma that had driven him underground. In return, Anya offered him a piece of her own guarded history. She spoke of a former business partner, a man she had trusted implicitly in the early days of her career. He had been her mentor, her friend, and he had stolen her groundbreaking work, patented it under his own name, and launched a smear campaign to ruin her reputation. "I learned a valuable lesson," she said, her voice devoid of emotion as she stared out at the city lights. Trust is a liability. Data is the only truth you can depend on. Data can be manipulated, Elias countered softly. It can be corrupted, like our algorithm. In the end, you still have to trust the person reading it. Her eyes met his across the desk, and in them he saw a flicker of vulnerability, an acknowledgement of the truth in his words. She trusted him. The realization was as terrifying as it was profound. Their hunt for the final, irrefutable proof against Marcus Vance intensified. The ping from his terminal was damning, but a good lawyer could argue it was spoofed. They needed the money. They needed to know where the tens of millions of siphon dollars had gone. Elias dove into the digital labyrinth of Vance's life. He peeled back layers of shell corporations, offshore accounts, and encrypted ledgers. Vance was a phantom, his financial footprint all but non-existent. He was clean, too clean. "He's not spending it," Elias said late one night, rubbing his tired eyes. "He's not investing it. It's just sitting in a dozen different currencies, in a dozen different banks. It's a war chest. He's preparing for something big." While Elias hunted in the digital world, Anya fought in the physical one. She managed the board, placated nervous investors, and fed Marcus a steady stream of misinformation. She told him they were bringing in an outside firm to audit the system, a deliberate misdirection to make him feel secure, to keep him from panicking and wiping the evidence. They were a seamless team, anticipating each other's moves, a partnership forged in crisis. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place. Elias was tracing Vance's encrypted communications, looking for any hint of a collaborator. He found a recurring data burst, heavily cloaked, to a server registered to a defunct company, Orion Satellite Communications. It looked like a dead end, a ghost corporation that had folded a decade ago. Why would he be talking to a ghost? Elias mused, staring at the screen. Anya, looking over his shoulder, went still. "Orion," she breathed. "I know that name. It was a subsidiary of a tech firm my old partner, Julian Croft, tried to acquire years ago. The deal fell through. Everything clicked into place at once." "It's not a communication," Elias said, a dawning horror in his voice. "It's a transfer, a massive one. He's not just stealing money, Anya. The money is a distraction. He's stealing the algorithm itself. He's been smuggling out your proprietary predictive analytics data, piece by piece. The crown jewels of Aerodyne." The full scope of the treachery was suddenly, sickeningly clear. Vance wasn't just a thief. He was a saboteur. He was planning to bankrupt Aerodyne from the inside while siphoning off its most valuable asset. "And who is the CTO at the rival firm that's been trying to buy us out for the last year?" Anya asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Elias typed a few commands. A name and a face appeared on the screen. Julian Croft, her old partner, her personal demon. The betrayal was deeper and more personal than she could have ever imagined. Vance wasn't just working for himself. He was the weapon her greatest enemy was using to destroy her. The motive was laid bare, a cold and brutal calculus of greed and revenge. Marcus Vance, in concert with Julian Croft, was orchestrating the systematic destruction of Aerodyne Global. The stolen money was merely the grease for the wheels. The real prize was the predictive algorithm, the engine that drove the company. With it, their rival would dominate the market. Without it, Aerodyne would be a hollow shell. "He's going to make one final transfer," Elias stated, his focus absolute. The war room was a hive of quiet, intense activity. He had mapped out the data bursts to Orion Satellite. The transfers are timed to coincide with periods of extremely high network traffic, to mask the bandwidth usage. The annual shareholders' meeting is in 2 days. It's the perfect cover. That's when he'll send the source code. Anya finished, her mind already leaping ahead, formulating a plan. "The whole thing. We have to intercept it," Elias said. "Capture the packet in transit. It's the only way to have irrefutable, undeniable proof of the transfer. It will be the smoking gun." The plan was audacious, bordering on impossible. During the most important public event of her company's year, While Anya was on stage defending her leadership to hundreds of investors and analysts, Elias would be in the sub-basement, performing open-heart surgery on the company's data stream. If he was detected, Vance would know the game was up. He could trigger a dead man's switch, wiping the servers, crashing the system, and burning all the evidence in the process. They had one shot. The 48 hours leading up to the meeting were a blur of preparation. Elias coded tirelessly, building a digital scalpel that could isolate and divert Vance's data packet without triggering the network's defense systems. Anya, meanwhile, prepared for the performance of her life, drafting a keynote speech that would keep the shareholders captivated and, more importantly, keep Marcus Vance pinned to his seat in the front row. The evening before the meeting, a fragile sense of calm settled over the penthouse. The storm was coming, and everything that could be done had been done. Elias found himself standing by the vast window, watching the city lights flicker to life. He wasn't looking at the view, but at the reflection in the glass. He saw himself, Anya, and the two children playing on the floor behind him. Leo had built an elaborate fort out of sofa cushions. Inside, he was showing Maya a comic book. And Maya, for the first time since Elias had met her, was talking. Not whispering, but speaking in a soft, clear voice, pointing at the colorful panels. And he flies away? Maya asked, her eyes wide. Yeah, Leo said excitedly. He flies up and saves everyone. He's the good guy. Anya came to stand beside Elias, her expression soft. Her therapist said it might be months, even years before she spoke in full sentences again. She looked at him, her usual analytical gaze replaced with something warm and unguarded. You see things other people miss, Elias. In numbers and in people. I just gave her a safe place to land, he said quietly. You did the rest. A silence stretched between them, comfortable and freighted with unspoken meaning. The crisis had stripped them down to their essential selves, and in the wreckage, they had found an unexpected, powerful connection. They were partners in every sense of the word. Tomorrow, Anya said, her voice firming, the CEO returning. We end this. Tomorrow, he agreed. That night, Elias did one final sweep of Vance's encrypted communications. He found what he was looking for. A single, heavily coded message sent to a server traced back to Julian Croft. Elias worked for hours breaking the encryption. When he finally succeeded, the message was simple and chilling. The eagle is leaving the nest tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Prepare for delivery. The queen will be dethroned by noon. The eagle was the algorithm. The queen was Anya. Vance wasn't just planning to steal from her. He was planning to announce her ruin, live on stage, at the moment of her greatest vulnerability. The trap wasn't just for the data. It was for her. And they were walking right into it. The ballroom of the Aerodyne Grand Hotel was a sea of dark suits and expectant faces. The air crackled with the low hum of hundreds of conversations, the clinking of water glasses, and the relentless, silent judgment of the global market. On stage, under the glare of a dozen spotlights, a single lectern stood on a vast, empty expanse of corporate blue. It looked like the loneliest place on earth. Backstage, Anya Sharma took a final, steadying breath. She smoothed the lapels of her perfectly tailored jacket, her movements calm and deliberate. To her security chief, Henderson, who stood stoically beside her, she was the picture of confidence. Inside, her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. She had an encrypted earpiece, her only link to the man in the basement. Comms check, Elias, she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. Loud and clear, his voice came back, calm and grounding. I'm in position. The network is buzzing. It's perfect cover. You just need to keep him in his seat until 10:30. Acknowledged, she gave Henderson a curt nod. It was time. As she walked onto the stage, a wave of polite applause washed over her. Her eyes scanned the front row. There he was. Marcus Vance, looking patrician and smug, gave her a small, encouraging smile. The smile of a viper. In the sub-basement, Elias was surrounded by a constellation of monitors. The network traffic flowed before his eyes, a torrential river of light and data. He had his digital scalpel ready. His task was to spot a single specific drop of water in that raging river, pluck it out, and leave no ripple behind. The fate of the company rested on his focus, on his ability to see the music in the noise. Anya began her speech. She spoke of growth, of innovation, of the future of global logistics. Her voice was strong, her delivery flawless. She was in complete command. She could feel Vance's eyes on her, feel his anticipation. He thought he was watching a queen on the eve of her execution. The clock on Elias's monitor ticked past 10:25 a.m. "Any moment now," he muttered. He filtered the data stream, stripping away 99% of the traffic, focusing only on encrypted outbound packets of a certain size. The river became a stream. On stage, Anya began to deviate from her prepared remarks. "But numbers, as we know, are only part of the story," she said, her gaze sweeping the room before landing on Vance. "The true foundation of any successful enterprise is not its assets or its algorithms. It is trust. It is loyalty." Vance's smile tightened. He shifted in his seat, a flicker of unease in his eyes. This was not the speech she had submitted to the board. 10:29. Elias's eyes widened. "There. I see it, a packet of data, massive and heavily encrypted, disguised as a routine backup of the building's climate control system. It was clumsy. It was arrogant. It was perfect. He's making his move. I'm going in." His fingers flew across the keyboard, executing the program he had built. He was rerouting the packet, shunting it into a secure, isolated server, a digital prison, while simultaneously sending a dummy packet to the original destination to avoid tripping an alarm. It required picosecond timing. Vance's watch vibrated. A discreet notification. A delivery failure. His face paled. Something was wrong. He looked up at Anya, who was now staring directly at him, her speech on loyalty turning into a pointed sermon on betrayal. "It is the betrayals from within," she said, her voice ringing with cold fury, "that are the most corrosive, the ones that come from those you once called a friend, a mentor." He knew. She knew. Vance stood up abruptly and made for the aisle, whispering an apology to the person next to him. "He's on the move," Elias said into the comms. "I have the packet. It's secure. He's heading for the exit." "Negative," Henderson's voice cut in, watching the security feeds. "He's not going to the exit. He's heading for the executive elevator. To the penthouse." The blood ran cold in Elias's veins. The kids, Leo and Maya, were in the penthouse with their nanny. It wasn't a retreat. It was a new attack. Vance was going for leverage. Anya heard the communication in her ear. Without missing a beat, she concluded her speech. "And we will root out that betrayal, and we will protect the future of this company. Thank you." She walked off stage, not to the polite applause, but to Henderson. "Lock down this room. No one in or out. Get me to the penthouse. Now." Elias was already moving. He didn't wait for an elevator. He burst from his server room and sprinted for a maintenance corridor. He knew the building's secret passages, its service routes, its bones. He had spent months pushing a broom through them. He could beat the executive elevator. He had to. The penthouse doors slid open. Marcus Vance strode in, his face a mask of controlled panic. He saw the nanny and the two children, startled, rising from the floor where they'd been playing. This was his last desperate gambit, a hostage. But as he took a step towards them, a figure emerged from the doorway of the service corridor, a place Vance didn't even know existed. It was the janitor. He stood between Vance and the children, not with menace, but with an immovable solidity. He was no longer a ghost. He was a guardian. "It's over, Marcus," Elias said, his voice quiet and steady. Vance stared, uncomprehending. The janitor? Before he could process it, the main elevator chimed and Anya swept in, flanked by two security guards. He was trapped. His eyes darted from Elias's resolute face to Anya's icy fury. There was no escape. Anya raised her tablet. On the screen, displayed for him to see, was the contents of the data packet he had just tried to send. The source code, the transaction logs, the name of the buyer, Julian Croft. The board is watching this live feed from my security details body camera. Marcus, she said, her voice deadly calm. Would you like to address them? In a final, pathetic act of defiance, Vance lunged. Not at Anya, not at Elias, but at the closest, most vulnerable target. He lunged for Maya. Elias moved. He didn't throw a punch. He didn't make a sound. He simply flowed into the space between them, turning his body, absorbing the impact of Vance's charge with his shoulder. It was the movement of a father protecting a child, an instinct pure and absolute. The force of the blow sent a jarring shock through him, but he held his ground. Security swarmed in, subduing the struggling, defeated man. It was over. In the sudden quiet, Maya ran to her mother, and Leo ran to Elias, wrapping his arms around his father's waist. The fight was done. The queen was not dethroned, and the hidden king had finally stepped out of the shadows. In the aftermath of the confrontation, a surreal calm descended upon the penthouse. The noise of the shareholders' meeting, the frantic energy of the hunt, the sharp violence of the final moments. It all faded, replaced by the quiet sounds of their children's breathing. Marcus Vance was gone, escorted away by a team that was part corporate security, part federal agent. The board was in a panicked, closed-door session, watching a replay of the feed Anya had sent, the digital ghost now a flesh-and-blood traitor. Leo was still clinging to Elias's leg, his small face buried in the coarse fabric of the janitor's uniform. Across the room, Anya knelt, holding Maya, stroking her hair, whispering reassurances. For a long moment, the four of them existed in their own bubble, two separate families suddenly and irrevocably fused into a single protective unit. Anya finally looked up, her eyes finding Elias. He had a small, purpling bruise forming on his cheekbone where Vance's flailing arm had caught him. A ghost of a smile touched her lips, the first genuine, unburdened smile he had ever seen from her. "You're a fast mover for a janitor," she said, her voice soft. "I have my moments," he replied, the knot of tension in his own chest finally beginning to loosen. The next 24 hours were a controlled whirlwind. Anya, with Elias now firmly by her side as her chief advisor, managed the fallout with surgical precision. She let the board fire Vance. Then she calmly informed them she was restructuring the entire corporate security and risk assessment divisions. There would be no more secrets, no more ghosts in her machine. The following morning, she called a press conference. She stood before a bank of cameras, not as a victim of a corporate attack, but as a triumphant leader. She didn't hide the truth. She controlled the narrative. She announced that Aerodyne had identified and neutralized a grave internal threat, an act of corporate espionage that had been thwarted not by an army of consultants, but by the brilliance of one man. This man's integrity and unique skill set saved this company from a catastrophic loss. She announced, her voice ringing with conviction. "It is my honor to introduce you to the new head of Aerodyne's Risk Assessment and Data Security Division, Mr. Elias Thorne." She turned and gestured to Elias, who stepped forward into the blinding flash of cameras. His image was instantly broadcast across the world. The hidden king was hidden no more. He felt a familiar surge of anxiety, the instinct to retreat, to vanish. But then he felt Anya's hand on his back, a small, steadying pressure. He stood tall. He was not running anymore. Later that day, in the quiet of her office, she slid an official contract across the desk to him. The salary was astronomical. The benefits included things he'd never even considered. It was a golden key to a new life. "This is what you've earned," she said formally, though the look in her eyes was anything but. Elias looked at the contract, at the title, at the staggering numbers. He thought of the corner office that would come with it, the meetings, the corporate politics. He pushed it back across the desk. "It's not what I want." Anya looked surprised. "But this is everything." "I don't want to be an executive," he said simply. "I don't want to manage people. I want to hunt. I want to find the vulnerabilities before our enemies do." He leaned forward, his passion for the work reigniting. Let me build a new kind of team. A small, elite, independent unit that reports only to you. A red team of ghosts. Our only job is to try and break your systems, to find the flaws, to think like the enemy. We'll be the company's internal predators. It'll make Aerodyne impenetrable. Anya listened, a slow smile spreading across her face. He wasn't just an employee, he was an innovator. Partner. Whatever you want, Elias. The resources are yours. The professional negotiation was over. A personal one hung in the air between them. The silence was charged with unspoken gratitude, with shared trauma, with the undeniable bond they had forged in the fire. Anya, he began, not sure what he was going to say. She stopped him, her gaze direct and clear. Thank you, Elias, she said, the two words carrying the weight of everything. For my company, for my daughter, for me. The last words went unsaid, but he heard them anyway. The new order had been established, not just in the boardroom, but in the quiet, hopeful space between two people who had found each other in the dark. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed into a kitchen that smelled of maple syrup and fresh coffee. There were no glass walls here, only warm, yellow-painted drywall covered in children's artwork. A suburban house with a sprawling backyard, quiet and blessedly normal. Elias stood at the stove, flipping a pancake with a practiced flick of his wrist. He wore an old t-shirt and flannel pants, the uniform of a Saturday morning dad. His consulting division at Aerodyne, the Phantoms as they were unofficially known, had already become the stuff of corporate legend, but here he was just Leo's dad. Leo, now 9, was meticulously setting the table, chattering about a goal he'd scored in his soccer game the day before. At the table, Maya, her hair in 2 bright pigtails, was drawing. She wasn't silent. She was humming the folk song about the lost star, the tune now a happy, familiar refrain in their lives. She was telling Leo about a dream she'd had where she could fly over the city, pointing out all the parks. Her voice, once a rustle of whispers, was now clear and confident. Anya entered the kitchen, dressed not in a power suit, but in a soft gray sweatshirt and yoga pants. The tension that had once radiated from her was gone, replaced by a relaxed, easy grace. The Ice Queen had melted, leaving behind a warm, intelligent woman who smiled more than she ever had before. She came up behind Elias, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her chin on his shoulder. "Smells good," she murmured, her voice warm against his ear. "Pancakes are my one true superpower," he replied, leaning back into her embrace. Felt natural, felt like home. They looked out the kitchen window at the green expanse of the backyard. A newly assembled swing set stood proudly in the middle of the lawn, waiting for the day's adventures. Their conversations, once dominated by encrypted data and corporate threats, were now about parent-teacher conferences and whose turn it was to choose the movie for family movie night. The transformation was so complete it was sometimes hard to remember the sterile penthouse and the looming crisis that had brought them together. Leo padded over, holding up his latest masterpiece. It was a crayon drawing of 4 stick figures standing in front of their new house. A tall man, a tall woman, a small boy, and a small girl, all holding hands under a giant, smiling yellow sun. At the bottom, in proud, wobbly letters, he had written, "The Thorn Sharma Team." Anya took the drawing, her eyes shining. She looked at Elias, a world of emotion passing between them in a single, silent glance. Everything they had fought for, everything they had feared losing, was right here in this sunlit kitchen. He had been so determined to find a quiet life for his son, and she had been so desperate to find a connection for her daughter. They had found it together. Later, they sat on the back porch, mugs of coffee in their hands, watching the 2 children chase each other across the lawn, their laughter echoing in the crisp autumn air. The scars of their pasts hadn't vanished. The memory of Sarah, the trauma of Maya's silence, the betrayals that had shaped them, they were all still there, but they were no longer gaping wounds. They were healed-over lines that told the story of where they had been and how they had survived. They had found a new, stronger kind of peace, one that wasn't built on hiding from the world, but on building a world of their own. He had spent years hiding in the shadows, only to find that the brightest light had been waiting for him all along, not in the absence of fear, but in the courage to build a future beside it. Have you ever found strength in an unlikely partnership, or discovered a hidden talent when it was needed most? The greatest treasures are often found when we have the courage to step out of the shadows we build for ourselves. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that inspire and surprise.